With Halloween around the corner, let's go through my collection and talk about some horror-themed games and films and things like that I would recommend you guys play. And I'm going to try and be less, what's the word, stereotypical here. I'm not going to recommend you to watch Hereditary, for example, because while Hereditary is brilliant, it's very stereotypical. Hereditary is the horror movie equivalent of a finance bro saying, guys, Wolf of Wall Street, go watch it. Also, big portion of you guys that watch these videos are not already subscribed, so if we could fix that, that'd be fantastic. I want my silver play button over there at some point, you know. Okay, so first of all, let's go through some games, shall we? Let me show you what I consider to be one of the scariest games I have ever played, bar none, never beaten it, probably never gonna beat it, don't even want to play it because it was just spooky. If you want just a night of just feeling uneasy, get some friends in a room and play this game, you'll be like, what am I even doing? Let me get it for you. I'm talking about Siren Blood Curse. Now, physically, it's kind of an expensive game these days, but if you still have a PlayStation 3, I think it's still available on the PlayStation Store for like 12 quid or something like that. In fact, I have had this digitally forever. Actually, I'm telling complete lies. This is available right now on PlayStation Plus, I'm pretty sure. So you don't even have to pay anything at all if you're already on there, like the majority of you guys probably are. But fun story. I have had this downloaded digitally on the PlayStation 3 since it released. Yeah? But then in my efforts to collect physically, because, well, that's what we do here, isn't it? I had to spend £52 to get it physically. And when I got it from the CEX that I was going to, I remember the manager was like, God damn it, I was going to pick that up. And I was like, I don't know why you didn't just put it aside for yourself. Like, no one could have stopped you, you know? Anyway, let me read the synopsis of the back. It is actually a remake. We'll get through that. In a remote Japanese mountain village, a strange ritual ends in bloodshed, a ghostly siren wails, and for an all-American film crew trapped on a mountain, a nightmare is unleashed. Steel yourself for a terrifying ordeal as you fight to stay alive against the savage Shibito. The Shibito are the enemies in these games, and they're effectively somewhat sentient zombies that cannot be permanently put down, and they make horrible, horrible noises. Siren Blood Curse is actually some sort of remake-quel to Forbidden Siren and Forbidden Siren 2, but obviously those games are going to be less playable in modern day. You'll also notice that one of the main characters of this game is good old Yuri Lowenthal, otherwise known as Spider-Man or Sasuke Uchiha, which is kind of cool. Next up, something else that I really love and I think is very apt for Halloween is the Resident Evil 1 remake, which I'm pretty sure is also on PlayStation Plus, but if it isn't physically, it's available within the Origins collection, and it's wonderful. When it comes to scary, I much prefer things that scare you through atmosphere and tone and vibe versus just things going a boogly woogly woo in your face. I could make some horrendous noises right now and just make you jump. That didn't necessarily make you scared, it made you jump. Those two things are not the same, and there are a lot of horror games that just make you jump that are not, in essence, that scary. For example, I'm not going to put Outlast on this list because of the fact that that is an example of a game that I don't think is that scary once you get your head around the fact that all you got to do is run away. Because it's like, it's a jump scare game, you know? Once you realise what the worst that can happen is, I think the fear factor in that goes away quite quickly. But in like, for example, Resident Evil Remake, the vibe of the mansion is just wonderful. I wish more games did this. It's why I quite enjoyed Silent Hill 2 Remake that came out this week. It's that you want small, cozy environments that you will frequently move through over and over again, probably using some sort of in-game map to make sure that rooms are cleared, you've picked up all the items, you're probably solving some puzzles along the way. This is a game where the enemies are all a threat. A single zombie is a problem. Whereas in like most zombie games, a single zombie is like, oh, we're going to have our way with you. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people have played a lot of the Resident Evil games, but not the first Resident Evil remake due to the fact that they're under the impression that it's still tank controls. You can turn off the tank controls and play it like any other game, but you still have to deal with the fixed camera angles. And I promise you that if you're somebody that thinks you're not going to like fixed camera angles, just give it an hour or two and you won't even notice it anymore. The fixed camera angles adds to the intensity of the game because you're only ever seeing specifically what the developer intended you to do. The art direction and things like that is such that it will draw your eyes into specific places, given that you are seeing specifically in that moment what you are supposed to be seeing versus what you are happen to be looking at if you had the free aim camera. And that means that a lot of the scenes can set more of an atmospheric tone just because of you'll walk into a room, the camera will tilt scarily. or make you unnerved by that. You'll hear something before you can see it because of the fact the camera ain't letting you see it yet. And all of this just adds up into just such a brilliant atmosphere that if you've never played it, give it a shot. It's not a very long game. Realistically, as long as you're proficient and understand the way a map works in these games, you'll probably be done in about 5 hours. If you want something a little bit more action-oriented and a little bit more modern in terms of control scheme and playstyle, I think that a lot of people overlooked The Evil Within back when it came out. I think that if you're somebody that has enjoyed the recent remakes of the Resident Evil games, for example, give Evil Within a go. You'll probably really enjoy it. It plays just like RE4 did. It was heavily inspired by the original RE4, and the thing that people complained the most about this for was the letterbox mode. It's got a weird cinematic thing to it when by default, but they patched it so that you can turn that off and play it like a normal game, and I do that. One of the best ways that I can describe Evil Within is it's very weird, and it takes place within almost like a dreamscape Matrix scenario, in which case almost anything can happen, and it's almost like the whole game is some sort of lucid nightmare. So for those that don't know, a lucid dream is when you are in a dream, you are fully aware that you are dreaming, and typically you can take control of yourself and the dream around you whilst you're still asleep. People try for years to cause a lucid dream to happen because they want to do fun things. A lucid nightmare might be the alternative, where you are in full control over yourself and you are self-aware of the fact that you are in a dream and you are like there, but it's a nightmare in that now you are just living through whatever scenario is put in front of you, and that's kind of what the game is like. But there's a whole upgrade system through the game where enemies drop some sort of ooze and goo, and you're in some sort of psychiatric hospital in between main events, and you can use like an electric chair to zap your brain and modify things about the character that you're playing as, whether it be like the speed that you're able to move at, the health regen, the ammo that you've got, all that sort of thing. It's a really fun game, and again, especially if you enjoyed RE4 Remake, any of the recent sort of over-the-shoulder third-person shooter style semi-horror games like Last of Us or whatever, you will probably have a fun time with Evil Within. On a similar note to that, if you're into all of what I've just said, but like sci-fi settings, there's Dead Space. You could realistically play Dead Space Remake or Dead Space the original 1 and 2. They have aged extremely well. Doesn't really matter which one you choose. You're going to have a fun time regardless, although you could probably avoid Dead Space 3. Once again, it's basically, and some people hate this description, it's kind of Resident Evil 4 in space. If you've ever played, or if you've ever seen films like Event Horizon, films like The Thing, anything like that, you'll enjoy these. You play an engineer stuck on a ship. There is an outbreak of, they're called necromorphs, but for all intents and purposes, they are humans mutated into monstrous things with blades for appendages, and rather than the typical thing being headshot takes out the monster, it's you've got to cut their limbs off. And you don't have traditional weaponry for the majority of the game. You do get like assault rifles like midway through, but for a lot of the game, the weapons that you're using are supposed to be engineering tools. Like the main core iconic weapon of the franchise is the plasma cutter, where it shoots a beam that slices things, and there is a trophy in each one of the games for beating the game explicitly only with that plasma cutter, and it is such a fun weapon to use that it isn't even a chore to have that happen. In some cases it kind of makes the game easier, because in a lot of games like this, the game will only drop ammo for the weapons that you actually use, so if you never actually take another weapon that isn't the plasma cutter, you might not get any ammo for anything that isn't the plasma cutter and then end up with way too much ammo, or way more than enough ammo. But the point is that, once again, it's atmospheric, the HUD elements are minimal so that nothing takes you out of that immersion. So, for example, the map is brought up in-game through Isaac's palm. The guidance in terms of where you're going next is once again a physical thing that Isaac does versus like a waypoint that's just floating above your head. There's no actual health bar. The closest thing to a health bar you've got is on Isaac's suit. There is a light that goes down his back from green, or well, blue, all the way down to red. That is indicative of his health. All of the different HUD elements that would typically take you out of an immersion thing are all built into these games. And again, they're all good choices. Now, one more game that I'm going to suggest here. It's arguably not a horror game. I'm going to consider this a bit of a baby's first horror game. If you're somebody that isn't necessarily into horror but wants something a little bit unnerving, what I want you to play, the original BioShock. This is a very easily accessible game these days due to the fact that there is the BioShock collection, and I'm pretty sure it's even on Game Pass. So realistically, there's no excuse to not be able to play this. This is one of the most critically acclaimed games of all time due to the story. But if you just forget the story for a second, the actual like moment-to-moment gameplay is rather intense. There is this atmosphere of you are weaker than everything around you. Every corner that you turn is a potential risk. It's dark, it's dingy, it's spooky. People forget just how Bioshock 1 was almost a horror game. Like I said, you could almost call it baby's first horror game. Now that I've recommended you some games to play, let me recommend you some films to watch instead, shall we? Okay, so the first film that I'm going to recommend you guys watch this Halloween is one of my favourite Halloween films. It's Grave Encounters. There are two of them. The second one is not as good as the first, but the gist of these films... You know those like documentary-style ghost hunting shows where they know it's fake, we know it's fake. They go walk around some abandoned place going, "Did you hear that? What was that? It just got cold. Somebody touched me." That sort of thing. Well, the main characters in this are those sorts of people. In the world of Grave Encounters, they run a TV show just like that. They're going to this asylum and they're going to do an episode in the asylum just like that. However, it ends up being real. And it gets very real very quickly. And the way that it gets real is something that I wish more films did and not enough films do. This isn't your traditional like haunted house. This isn't your traditional monster movie. This is the asylum itself is the evil entity that starts messing with the characters. And I love that because I used to have dreams about stuff like this where I'll talk about this in a sec. So, for example, once things start kicking off, there's now time dilation. They have no idea how much time has passed. They go look at their freezer with food in it and like sandwiches have gone off. And they were like, that should not have gone off for 4 days, but the cameras say we've been here for 3 hours. They've got 4 days worth of facial hair. They've got no idea how much time is passing and they can't leave. They start trying to get out. They go through doors because in the daytime, just like in all those TV shows, the caretaker for the asylum shows them around and shows them where everything is, the different rooms and what happened in these rooms before it was abandoned. And now, whilst it's nighttime and they're stuck in there, they're exploring, but doors are not leading where they're supposed to go. They walk through a door expecting one room and they're in another. They go, what the hell, what's going on? They turn around, go back through the door they just came through, and once again, they are still not where they've just left. And through that, they get separated and things like that, and it is just right up my alley. I love stuff like this. I used to have dreams, because I've always had like night terrors and these lucid nightmares and such like that, where I wouldn't know I was dreaming until I walked through a door that did not lead where it was supposed to lead, and I would be stuck in it trying to figure out a way out and just things like that. That used to happen to me all the time when I was younger. It was, in hindsight, great fun, but a bit stressful at the time. But like that sort of vibe in a horror film, I love it. So Grave Encounters, give it a try. Next up, this is a little bit controversial. If you've never seen an Evil Dead film, and you're only gonna watch one, and it's only because it's Halloween and you want something scary, you're probably looking at the 2013 Evil Dead film. Realistically, watch all of the Evil Dead films. They're all great. But if we're looking for something that's actually going to make you like feel uneasy, Evil Dead 2013 is probably going to achieve that more than the original Evil Dead in modern day. Because in modern day, I think a lot of people are going to watch the Evil Dead 1, and because it's kind of a black comedy, they're going to be like, it's just not that scary. Whereas this is decently unnerving, and anybody that remembers the trailer for this film back when it came out was like, oh, that's not good. General gist of that Evil Dead from 2013 is that a bunch of friends go and stay in a cabin because one of their friends is detoxing from drugs, and they are going to have to stay there no matter what happens to this girl. And then things get freaky, things get possessed, not even just people, but the stuff around them, and from then on in, things fall apart. I can't say too much more than that. Just watch it. It's Evil Dead. They're all good. You've heard of it, even if you've not seen it. Come on. Next up, Triangle. This is one I have never really seen anyone else talk about. This is a time loop movie, which again is also right up my alley. A bunch of friends go on a holiday, they're on a yacht, and then they start getting picked off by things and people. But then it very quickly turns into a time loop film. I think a lot of time loop films, the time loop isn't necessarily horror themed, and in this one it is. And on rewatches, you're just like, oh yeah, that does make more sense now. Like, there's a lot about it where you don't... So, for example, this isn't a spoiler, this is just trying to help you make context of why this is kind of cool, is that all of the friends that are on this boat are not necessarily partaking in the same loop at the same time. The main character that you're following, as they are like navigating this ship, might encounter one of their friends who is on their third loop or something like that, or their second loop, or who haven't looped at all yet. And each one of them is kind of out of sync with each other. as things try to come to a climax. And just, it's an enjoyable film. Like I said, a lot of these horror films are only like an hour and a half, so if you can find them, give them a watch. Triangle is a horror film with a time loop element set on a yacht. It's cool. Next up, after that, have a look at Splinter. This is a rather... I wouldn't even necessarily say this is very scary, but if you're somebody that likes like body horror, if you're somebody that likes traditional monster movie type things, I don't feel like we get too many monster movies anymore when it comes to horror things, because most things are very, very CGI. This is gross in a really good way. A way that I would try and explain this, if I was trying to explain it with no context, is imagine Venom came to Earth, but instead of being all goopy, he was very spiky, and anything he touched, those spikes then were able to control and spread throughout and make them move in ways that they're not supposed to move. For example, at one point in the film, a human hand gets infected with those spiky things, and the spikes make it move the way a hand is not supposed to move, like fingers bending the wrong way and creating new joints and things like that. If the spike touches you in any way, if you get a splinter, you're done. You are done. And they get stuck in a gas station trying to survive against these things that keep being reanimated and reconjoined and reamalgamated via these splinters. It's a pretty good old school monster movie that's not that old, you know? And as my final recommendation, we'll go with The Descent. So this is an interesting one. This is an all-female cast. It is a British horror film. It follows a bunch of friends that are almost like Daredevil type friends, where every year they get together and they go do a thing, whether it be skydiving, whether it be caving. So this time they're going caving, and they end up very, very stuck, and they find things down in these caves that they weren't supposed to find, and it's a very claustrophobic feeling film. Like, if you have claustrophobia, you're either going to love or hate this film, I'll tell you that. If you have claustrophobia and you like getting scared, you're going to adore this film, I'll tell you that. So yeah, that'll do for today, I think. Hopefully you take some of these recommendations, or you've played or watched some of these yourselves and can comment down below agreeing or disagreeing with me. Leave your lists down below. I think I did 5 games, 5 films. So yeah, I'll see you guys later.